So let's proceed. We'll do the transportation sector in the same series of COVID economy and business. As we all understand that the COVID has taken a big toll on the economy as a whole, and all the businesses are suffering. We have in previous days looked at some of the other segments like retail, education. We have looked at how, of course, COVID has generated, as at this point of time thought to be from Wuhan in China, spread across the world, how it has affected the global economy. And even as of today, there is no sign that it is sort of slowing down. There is some level of containment everywhere that is seen. There are some positive results, but overall the pandemic is still on, and the impact which it is having on the economy and the industry as a whole continues. And as many people are predicting, this situation is going to be there, at best for next 1 year, and it may be prolonged even beyond that. So it's very important that we understand how COVID is affecting all of us, and what it is in store for us. Because the understanding of that situation in the future will help us prepare much better and help us being ready for what is coming. Now, some terms of transportation, some broad idea. I thought it will be a precursor to starting. Transportation is a very large sector. In fact, if you take away agriculture, where almost 60% of the population is dependent. Now, India is a very agrarian economy, as we call. A large number of people are engaged in agriculture, though it is not very productive. We know agriculture contributes around 30%, probably today not even 30% of the GDP, but 60% of the people are engaged in agriculture, directly or indirectly. But if you take that out, the next biggest employer in the country possibly is the transportation sector, or transport and logistics sector, as you may say. So it is not just the trucks and buses which we see on the road. That number itself is huge. For example, India has 1 crore, 10 million trucks, so 10 million truck drivers. 1 crore truck drivers and 1 crore helper. At least 2 crore people are directly involved in the trucking business itself. And then, you take people like 15 lakh people are in railways. You take, the transport like buses, public buses, Ola, Uber, taxi service, auto service. Ola, Uber probably have 1 million people, 10 lakh cars are on Ola, Uber. Maybe that is the understatement today. And then this huge number of people who are engaged in, directly or indirectly, like people who are manufacturing the cars and the buses and the trucks, the automobile industry. That is huge. Globally, if you see some of the largest companies in every country are the automobile companies. You have heard of Ford, Chrysler, Honda in India, Maruti, Ashok Leyland, right? Now, if you go upstream, you will see that the largest production or the major part of the production of the steel plants. In fact, steel plant production is divided into 2 broad categories: the flats and the longs. Longs are the railway tracks and the coils, cables which they make, and flats are the ones which goes into making largely automobiles. Then you look at people who are developing the infrastructure, right, which we'll separately look into when we cover the infrastructure sector. But there are 700,000 kilometers of roads in the country. You have national highway itself, which is 100,000 kilometers. So the people who are building, people who are maintaining, you have this Border Roads Organization, which is exclusively with the Indian Army, which are different organization. There's a huge number of personnel are involved in the BRO, the Border Roads Organization. Then you look at this people who are drawing their livelihood from being next to the the tracks or the points. For example, each of the airports are huge business entities, including the metro ones today probably are generating hundreds of millions of dollars. Changi Airport, for example, I think is few $1 billion of revenue, maybe $4 or $5 billion of revenue. Indian airports are reaching there. Then you have this whole system of people who are supporting the drivers, support staff who are traveling, the passengers on the roads, these roadside shops, eateries, the hotels. Then you look people who are at the railway platforms, people who are hawking on the railway. So approximately it is assumed that around 70 million, 7 crore people are directly or indirectly dependent on the transportation sector. The logistics and transportation is around 5% of the GDP, which is a huge number. And look at it, it is not producing anything, it's just a service, because it is actually pushing people from one side, one location to other, or it is carrying goods from one location to the other. And approximately family size, if you take 4 or 5, around 30 to 35 crores of people are dependent out of 140 crores of people in India on the transportation sector. So this is very, very important from employment perspective, and even otherwise to move a economy, transportation is the key thing. So if you look at the definition of India or definition of any country, if you look at national currency, and national borders, the economy, except for that, if there is one thing which connects the whole country and makes it make a country, is the is the transportation, because everything else more or less is local. Healthcare, education, manufacturing, retail is local, but transportation is what is carrying people from one side to other, or goods. So let's look at the categories. There are two broad transportation, as we talked about. There's a passenger transport and freight transport, and all of them exist in roads, railways, and aviation. There are many other types of transport which we are, maybe subcategory, like urban transport is a combination of all three, except for all aviation. Then there you have waterways, the steamers, the launches, the luxury cruise ships, not so much in India, but it is always either passenger moving or freight moving. And of course, there are the categories within that. You may have health ambulance, or you have health, health ambulance, which can even be a helicopter or a plane, or you can have, among freights, perishable, non-perishable, all of that. The modes, as we talk, surface is train, intercity, urban transport, and probably if you take out walking, there are some 10 to 15 types of distinct way of transporting, especially people, right? You have auto, you have taxi, you have point-to-point auto, you have suburban rail, you have intercity, and all of that. So it's a large and complex area. Air is aviation, water is ocean, river, waterways. Now, ocean is largely freight nowadays, except for ocean liners or cruise ships. Then rivers and waterways are, of course, increasingly becoming popular, both for transport of goods and people in India. Passenger transport has been completely suspended in the country for last so many days. Freight is going on, but largely the essential goods, vegetables, medicine, all these personal protective, PPEs and stuff like that. As we have seen in the retail segment, for example, a lot of things like luxury goods, consumer electronics, those sort of things. There is no business nowadays, and obviously they are also not moving Food also, for example, you don't see movement of food which is beyond basic necessity, like refrigerated content, uh, like high value vegetables or ice cream, stuff like that. They're all stopped. But nevertheless, freight is on in a big way because the nation runs on that. Passenger is stopped, and we don't know when it is going to be open. If we move now to the what in COVID is going to affect is affecting primarily the passenger traffic. Now, is it only passenger traffic which is affected by COVID? That is not the case. But if you look at the freight, if you take a freight train, you will have probably 40, 50, 60 decks, and you have a driver and an assistant driver in an engine which is pretty much large for them to keep a distance, and you have a guard and assistant guard. Maybe at max 4 people are traveling with that goods train. And you can have a system of testing them. Maybe future when testing becomes much more easy, and you may actually be able to also identify people who should not be in the on duty because the risk they carry. But when you come to passenger trains, thousands of people are traveling. You have very little control on that. The same is with truck. Truck also has 2-3 people in the driver's chamber, but it's not a bus which has anything between 60 to 80 people in a public bus, right? So the fear of transmission is there in the freight side also, and that is where you will hear that while we have 10 million, one crore trucks and truck drivers in the country, the large number of them are actually still very unwilling to move out and do their duty, because it's not just they are not going to be in the truck only. They have to get down, they have to go for food, they have to go for shelter, toilets, and there is a fear that they will get contaminated. But the larger issue is obviously the transmission that will happen from passenger to passenger, any mode of transfer. So we have taken this example of one one paper which was published by one Hong Kong scientist. His name is mentioned here, Dr. Yuan Kyo Yong. And just hold on. And yeah, and if you see that in this figure, there is this red, which is the initial COVID carrier, and he ended up, affecting so many with COVID, with symptoms, without symptoms. Some got affected within 30 minutes. So they have taken the CCTV camera image of the bus as it traveled, and they went to the route of this passengers, who is the first passenger who was carrying it, and see how many people have got affected. One person affected, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people, right? Now, this paper was later withdrawn because of some, Chinese government opposed and stuff like that. But the fact is, it brings out that if you're in the closed space for a long time, and I assume this is the air-conditioned bus where air movement is limited, there's a high chance that you will be transmitting COVID in case somebody is affected. And now look at it for air travel, which is the extreme case where you are inside a aircraft for hours, and if in international travel it can be 60, 70 hours, and if there is one person who is affected and that the virus starts moving around, there is a very high chance that large number of people will be contaminated during the travel. So in the transportation of public, the biggest challenge and biggest fear is how do you ensure that you are not carrying a person who is COVID affected. You may or she may be showing symptoms or not showing symptoms, but irrespective of whatever it is, they have the power of transmitting. And this is what I think will be a key consideration, where all sorts of thinking, all sorts of planning will happen as to how do you make people move from one place to other, while minimizing, if not eliminating completely, the risk of contamination. Now, the few things we have to understand here is that transportation at some point of time is inevitable. We cannot be at our homes for all our life. But it is important that individuals identify what is a necessary transport or unnecessary transport. Organizations also look at things like work from home, work, work from remote, probably offices which are closer to home, temporary offices or something like that, if there are options like that. Or how do you minimize, what sort of transport should you take, if you have a choice between a non-AC and AC bus. I think with the same number of people inside, non-AC bus will be a better bet. All sorts of norms which are being talked about, that you can only have, when it starts, the car should have one passenger or maximum two family members apart from the driver. So we follow that. We follow personal hygiene. We wash our hands, wear gloves, if necessary, mask, and all of that. So that is something which we have to really figure out. How do we? The other point is minimize. Because you can never make it zero. To try to make it zero, you will end up spending a lot of money, which is not worth it. But we minimize it so that we can uh, eliminate as many situation as possible. So let's look at the aviation sector. As we know that right now aviation has been stopped across the world. India, for example, has been one of the first one. I think we started our scanning of passenger on 18th of January, and by we stopped the travel of people from China by end of January itself. And of course, India has one of the strongest, aviation restriction of travel. But it happened across the world. Majority of the countries, the domestic travel has stopped, international travel is stopped. And obviously, because of this, it's badly affected, because airlines is a capacity business. It's not a service that you create something and people consume. If you don't create, people don't consume. So you have the planes, you have the maintenance, you have the staff, crew, everything, and there is no passenger. So in any case, aviation is a very glamorous business, but most of the time doesn't make much money. You have seen so many airlines in India also has closed down over the years, and now it is in great trouble. So people are saying that probably it will take at least 5 years to really go back to the growth days for airlines. Of course, it will start in some form or other. How it will start, we'll see some possibilities. Even among the travel, people will not travel for holidays. Tourism will come down probably in a big way. People will only travel if there is family emergency. It is a personal travel. Business travel will be reduced drastically because of many reasons. But I see one is, first thing is that people have understood that a lot of business work can be done without traveling during this time. Second is organizations will try to take less chance of their people traveling and contracting the virus, and loss of productivity and all other issues. And third is the cost. Obviously, the economy is down, so you cut down on discretionary spend like business. Family probably only on emergencies or very critical needs. Job loss is expected 30% for flight staff, 60% for non-flight. Staff, it has already started. Many airlines have started. It will only increase. And beyond a point, the people who are not able to survive will be taken over. So there is a thought that in India, Air India will survive because of government support, and Indigo will survive because it has a lot of cash. The other airlines will just struggle and maybe over a period of time taken over by others.
You have to seen the Indian aviation sector expecting $3 billion loss in June quarter, which is not very far away. Air New Zealand has already, laid off all 777, Boeing 777 staff. That means that they are not looking at any international travel. That is primarily for the international travel. That's going to happen anytime soon. Um, Changi Airport has closed one terminal out of, I think they have four. So they don't see much of activity. Now people are talking, how do we make people travel? There are various ideas. How do we maintain? Do we find out screening? Obviously, screening means temperature screening and all will happen. But so will you go beyond that? Do some quick test of people for finding whether they're carriers. Immediately before boarding or maybe last 2 days before boarding. And how do you maintain social distancing in flight? We'll not have any food served clearly because there will be a lot of movement and contamination issues again because of exchange of cash and stuff like that. And how do you sanitize the toilet every time somebody use it or minimize it in the first place? uh, there may be some more models which will come up. Many individuals or many groups will try to find out ways to make aviation start again. But thoughts are on. Uh, this is the scenario, that virus progression, governance response, which is in black, which is this is from business Boston Consulting Group. Government has already responded in a particular way, and demand recovery will happen. We have talked some of it. Nobody knows. There, but then some amount of demand recovery will happen based on consumer sentiment, as much as the business and the market needs. Then we'll possibly have the crisis which will hit in terms of the liquidity crisis, cash flow crisis. The government may step in because air travel is very important in keeping the country connected. You can't afford not to have it. Will there be some bailouts, a consolidation, restructuring? We'll see. We'll have, but it is very badly affected for sure. The way the aviation companies have to probably do it is to look at this concept of journey maps and see that how a passenger travel. So obviously passenger starts from books the ticket, which can be online, taken print out, which is also at home, then get into a car, which now the new norms are coming that only one person behind and one driver. If it is a sort of a public transport, Ola, Uber sort of thing, then you come to the airport and then get into the flight, and the control of the airlines, for example, is not in the car at home, but within the flight and before boarding. So one is that they will do temperature screening and stuff like that, um, for sure, because the however much you clean the inside the aircraft, what is the most important person here is the passenger, and you don't know, right? And inside the flight there has to be probably alternate seatings, or sort of masks. This is some Avio Interiors has already come up with some suggestions that you will have seating where people are not facing each other, but facing the other direction. Or some are saying we'll keep alternate setting, like middle seat empty in the first row, and in the second row the middle seat is filled up, but the other two are sort of whatever the combination, so that that 3 to 4 feet is maintained. There are this thinking that there will be some sort of face mask along with face cover, or some isolation chamber, as we can see on the bottom left photograph. These are all suggestions. On the right side is a spice jet, has already marked seats where people can sit. If you can see, first row right seat is not to be sat on, second row left. And there's some other models where airlines are saying that we'll have the people pay extra for how they want to sit, right? So you might buy all three seats and you sit alone, right? Which was never allowed, but maybe now it will be allowed. Then you look at the public transport solutions. This is the bus. This is something I've taken from Toyota manual. You have, before getting in, maybe there should be some sort of temperature test in the bus or other public transport. Alternate seating, you already hear the government is saying that, out of 42 seats, only 21 will be allowed to come in. We'll see how implementation happens. In the car again, the driver in the first seat on the right side and the passenger on the second seat on left side, no four passenger, two passengers. A lot of, entrepreneurship will happen, like one I have put here. Automobile, for example, is a company which is saying that they will be cleaning up stuff at some price. So we'll see, how these companies will, help in. There may be system where they say that, I'll book the one complete compartment of the one company make complete compartment of railways, and then they may, you know, sell the ticket saying it is sanitized, and do quick test 48 hours before traveling. Go to individual houses, make sure that the people are clean and they can only board. If they're not clean, they can't board, and maybe take a double the price of what the ticket would have been. But at least you are sure that you are not traveling with contaminated people. So we'll see how it is. All thoughts which is coming out. See some of the resources as usual. I have kept some readings, base readings, and some other readings specific to this segment. Uh, catch up agriculture in the next session, as and this is how we can reach me. Now, net, we are at the end of what we wanted to discuss, but nevertheless, what we probably should summarize is that transportation is a very important segment. It provides a huge number of employment. A lot of people are dependent on that. Transportation is also a large part of the economy, as expected, but transportation is something which keeps the country together. And the goods, passenger, and at times a problem, security forces, military has to move, so transportation has to happen. Passenger transportation is at it's completely not happening today, but going forward, it will have to be opened up. Freight is happening. Freight is relatively less risk, but there is a lot of fear. We have to maintain all sorts of control and precautions and stuff like that. As we go forward to open up, rail, local transport, aviation, there are various models people are talking about. Probably they're much more easy, at least in the air travel, to implement some of these methods and charge a premium. Maybe it's more difficult as we come to passenger trains and local urban transport because of the cost issue and the load and stuff like that. However, having said that, people also have to find out where is the most essential movement they need to have. Organizations have to find out how they can cut travel for people to come to their office. And even if people move, they can look at which is a safer way to move rather than, for example, to move in an open transport rather than a transport which is air conditioned, even if it is uncomfortable. Or they have to see, what is the mode of transport they can really take. Avoid, old people who are more vulnerable, to come out and travel. Maintain self, sanitation at every stage. Take all precautions seriously, and the goal is to manage and minimize the impact rather than completely eliminate it, because that is not possible. And somewhere kickstart the economy with more freight movement and of course passenger movement. So we'll see it as we go forward, and people are working on various ideas. Companies are working. We have seen some ideas coming from companies like Toyota. Some startups have started with some sort of niche service, like I will clean your vehicle every day. You have this aviation sector is coming up with new ideas, and probably they will be the first one to adopt some of them. uh, but long road ahead. A lot of economic crisis will be there. It's not going to go away easily, but we have to fight it out with our innovation and commitment, dedication, discipline, and hard work. So I'll stop here, and if there are some questions, I will probably look at it.